this episode, we explore the good and the bad of Fort Jefferson, from its dark history to what's lurking below, and why the Dry Tortugas should be on your bucket list. Morning, everybody. It's probably around noon now, just about, so good afternoon just in case. And you might be watching it in the evening, so good evening. We are anchored a little closer to Fort Jefferson today. We set out this morning to go dive, and we made it there, and we realized that I was having a gear malfunction that would have pretty much made me get stuck on the bottom. So after, messing with it for maybe 10 minutes or so, we had to go on and call the dive. Unfortunate, because that's one of the things that we were looking forward to the most, coming to the Dry Tortugas, was, diving some of these pristine reefs and wrecks. So it's looking like we won't be able to do that on this trip, but I guess we will snorkel the fort and the reefs and check out what that has to offer, so that, as far as getting in the water and checking out the reefs, it's not a total bust.
Yeah, it was also pretty wavy out there too. The swim platform was slamming under, which is not ideal for the swim platform, so it's probably better we didn't hang around too long enough for it to loosen a bolt again.
Yeah, we've seen what happens when you hang out at a dive site too long and that platform just slams and slams. We had to, it almost came loose and we had to retighten it down. But the day is young, it's our last day here, so we are going to make the most of it, spend a lot of time out here at the fort, which is why we're anchored a little closer to it. And yeah, I guess it's time to get to it. Before we jump in, I just wanted to point out that millions of people visit the Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, and even the Florida Keys each year. Surprisingly, less than 80,000 people actually make it out here to the Dry Tortugas per year. This national park should be on more people's bucket list, just like the others. The water rivals the best of the Caribbean, and you don't even need a passport or a boat to get here. You can be here and back in a matter of hours, or camp overnight and truly become engulfed in this remote island. We had no idea at the time, but this trip, which was supposed to be our shakedown cruise before heading to the Bahamas for about 6 weeks, actually turned out to be our last hurrah of our time away from home. It was such a great experience that ending on this note only made this place that much more special to us. Bottom line, if the Dry Tortugas isn't on your bucket list, then I think your bucket list may be broken.
There's no denying the Dry Tortugas has to be one of the most majestic places we've been. After a long weekend of snorkeling these turquoise waters and exploring the different islands, this is definitely one of the coolest boat trips we've taken on Rome Haven so far. Oddly enough, when we explored Fort Jefferson, I couldn't help but notice the immense amount of hardship, famine, and tragedy that once thrived in this place. Since it's October that we're finally getting this video out, and Halloween is just around the corner, and I could really use a break from this type of music, we're gonna switch it up and cover the dark history of this fort.
Fort Jefferson began construction in 1846. With over 16 million bricks, Fort Jefferson is the largest brick masonry structure in the U.S. The fort had many uses, but was primarily built to protect a deepwater anchorage along a trade route. It was meant to be a strategically located, impenetrable fortress on the sea, but its legacy shows that in its day, it was better known as America's Devil Island. All lived in awful conditions, working long and hard in the blazing sun. The food quality was beyond terrible. Water supply was scarce and tainted. There was little protection from the elements, but an endless surge of mosquitoes. Slaves wore leg irons and shackles while performing the most laborious, dangerous, and filthy jobs. One never-ending task was hauling bricks in and around the fort while shackled in the blazing sun. With floors made of harvested coral and a moat filled with human waste, there was a horrendous smell throughout the island that never seemed to go away. During the Civil War, construction slowed, so the fort was used as a military prison, with prisoners being the primary labor force. The fort was plagued by multiple diseases that killed off occupants whose bodies were disposed of in the sea. Along with disease, murder, torture, and cannibalism also took place behind the fort walls. Almost 30 years after construction began, the fort was abandoned by the military in 1874 for being too costly and tactically obsolete. There was never a single shot fired into or out of the fort from any conflict, but it was far from a peaceful experience. The peacefulness we experienced during our stay was just as calming as it was eerie. With the image of sandy beaches, clear blue waters, rare bird species, and thriving marine life, it's easy to see life on Fort Jefferson as an experience that may not be too bad. The reality of it, though, is that life was worse than bad, and by many, life on the fort was considered worse than death itself.
I'm sure some of you Marylanders may be familiar with who Dr. Mudd is and what he did. Well, we are currently standing where he stayed for his imprisonment term. He dug this out, as Tiff just said, so that his bedding.
The audio didn't come out so great because I was on the wrong side of the mic, so here's a recap of what we were saying. Dr. Mudd dug this channel out to keep his bedding, which was nothing but straw, from getting wet. It also served to collect drinking water. Apparently he attempted to escape while working a detail loading a ship. He boarded the ship and attempted to flee, but was caught and thrown in solitary confinement. He was released from confinement to assist with the yellow fever outbreak, which eventually got his charges pardoned 4 years after his arrival to the fort.
For those of you who aren't familiar with Dr. Mudd, he might have provided medical assistance to someone responsible for assassinating a president. Attempting.
To assassinate.
He got him. He killed him. Lincoln. He killed him.
Oh, and Dr. Mudd helped
Yeah, Dr. Mudd helped John Wilkes Booth.
Booth, yeah.
Yes.
In the next episode, we make a 7-hour trip back to Key West, a